Hello, and welcome to the Herondale Boy Support Group. I'm Allie,
I'm Melanie.
And I'm Ginny.
and we're here to help. Another week. Another 2 weeks, actually. This is a bi-weekly podcast.
Mhm.
Yeah, it's been 2 weeks since we, well, not since we talked, but like since we
Not since the three of us have talked to each other,
We're
but since
friends
we've
in
gotten
real
on our
life. Oh my
podcast.
god.
We're friends. We play.
Sometimes
video
that still
games
baffles
together.
me.
Sometimes we play in kitchens together.
we do
Virtual
play
kitchens.
together.
Sometimes we go on adventures.
Yeah.
Listen, if you play video games, you've never played Plate Up, you need to go get it.
Oh
It's
my
like
God.
$20 on the
So
Steam store.
fun.
It's excellent.
Yeah, it's so fun. It's just a simple little co-op game, but
We failed all of our restaurants, but that's fine.
I wonder whose
doesn't
fault
matter,
that was.
right?
No, do not dare blame me.
The first time I was like, but like I'll say that the sushi restaurant setup was not conducive to 3 people, and just I
Yeah,
just
we
don't think
started that
it's
one
gonna
with 2
work.
people.
The dumpling
Anyway,
Yeah.
anybody who has no idea what Played Up is not going to know
Restaurant.
any idea what we're talking about.
That's fine.
Right. Anyways, yeah, it's a good time though. It's a good time. It brings us closer together as friends.
I don't know about that.
Sure.
Sometimes we argue with each other, but like we haven't argued terribly over that one.
No, I don't think so.
But
And if we're not-
we haven't.
Yeah.
Okay.
As a trio.
Okay. As the three of
Maybe
us, maybe
you
we
two-
If
haven't.
we're not doing
Maybe
that,
you two
usually
play
we're
together.
going on. If we're not doing that, we're usually going on adventures that may or may not involve dragons
Oh,
and
that's
some
true.
dungeons.
Oh yeah, that's true. We do go on adventures together too.
Yep. Yes.
In
That may
big
involve
and
dungeons and/or dragons.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Nerds.
We
All
are
of us.
nerds. I love some Dungeons and Dragons.
Eileen's our DM.
I am our DM
Ellie
for
is our
this group.
DM.
Yeah. The forever DM. It's fine. I have other groups that I play
She
in.
was a DM at
I
Kites
did
for a little bit.
It just, well, I would love to try it again at some point, but I just think that so it's hard to be a DM, you know, like the improv skill is significant that you need, and
Yeah.
I don't have a lot of improv skill personally. And then there's just like different dynamics of, you know, when we have a whole group of new people, it's one thing to
Hi,
have a new
hello,
group
it's
and
me. I'm the new person.
that's new. So like, yeah, it's just a whole thing.
It's a whole thing. But we are learning together, and it's a good time.
We are, yeah.
And I do get to play. I have other campaigns that I play in. One's on stream, which is fun. It's an actual play on Twitch. That's a good time. But then Ginny and I play together. We play twin kobolds named Tink and Tox.
Small dragon.
I didn't know this is what
games.
you guys play.
Yes, they're small dragon creatures.
Yes.
And Tox is smelly.
Yep. Tox is smelly, basement child, and Tink is
Tinkerbell?
pink.
Tink is pink.
Oh, pink.
Tink is like the
Tink is
cheerleader in
pink.
high school. She's like really bubbly and like really enigmatic and like.
So, Tinkerbell from Disney Fairies.
So think.
I'm thinking like that's the person. I'm
vibe, but not their personalities.
not the
necessarily,
person.
but
I'm not like the
vibe.
person. Obviously, it's not Tinkerbell. I'm thinking like the vibe of the personality,
I
personality
mean,
wise.
kind of.
Kind of.
Anyway,
But yeah, Tink
yeah,
is short for Tinker because she's an artificer. So she like builds things. It's very exciting.
and Tink is a Tinker Fairy. Anyway,
Oh, that is
I'm
true,
getting-
isn't it?
we're gonna.
Listen, Ginny
I
and I
could
are
go on a
just
whole
slightly
tangent.
on this edge of too old for Disney fairies.
I'm slightly too old for them as well, but I still know.
My sister had a phase where she was into it.
Anyway.
Yeah.
What else? Any? Oh my God! Anything else happened this week for you guys that was exciting?
I mean, we were reading during Dungeons and Dragons, so I can't tell you what happened during that session, really.
I mean, a lot happened, but also not a lot happened either. Like there are points when it's just a lot of lore, and we're like,
Honestly, Sometimes
We
I
love
can't
our
tell you what
DM
happens
so
during.
much.
I sometimes
we
can
do.
honestly tell you what happens in our sessions. So
Well, there's that.
well, there's that. Somebody
for lack
needs
of
to work on
trying.
something. I'm not sure whether it's the player or the DM in this situation, but okay.
Listen, we all struggle.
well, we have
Me
so many like not even so many. We just have very different personalities in our campaign.
We do.
do.
We do.
That it's just chaos.
All the time.
It is, but it's a good time.
That's the
It's a good
best way to
time.
play Dungeons and Dragons.
Yeah. But what else would other things that we've been doing this week? We've been planning our trip to London and Paris.
Yes, we're gonna see some of these places
So
that are in these books.
Yeah, it's exciting.
Exciting.
We are probably gonna eat at a restaurant next to Blackfriars Bridge. Is what we
Yep.
figured out, right?
Yes, it's right from
I
Blackfriars
don't-
Bridge.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
didn't know that. I hadn't read these books when I had went to England and France when I was in high school.
Mhm.
So, even so, I don't think I could have done that because it was like we had chaperone things we had to do. So I don't think I could have gone to like Blackfriars Bridge or whatever.
We are gonna have some free time, which is nice. But yeah, right in front of Blackfriars Bridge. This is where Jem and Tessa have all of their really important moments. It is symbolic of that relationship. We have a morning walk in Hyde Park, where we can go see the ducks that may or may not be
We're gonna
cannibalistic.
go try and find the cannibal ducks. Yep.
I don't have anything like that. I just went to the beach this week and I got sunburned.
The beach is fun. And we're also
Getting
gonna go to
sunburned
Paris.
is not.
Getting sunburned is not. But going to Paris, and we'll see some moments from Chain of Thorns, which is quite a few podcasts in the future. But Paris, we'll get some pictures there as well.
They go to Paris in the Shadowhunters show.
Do they?
Oh, okay.
That's fun.
Very briefly.
Ooh,
Well, as we know,
we did not know that.
Jenny and I are not fans of the show particularly. We've seen.
I want you to get it. I want to
episodes.
want to do a watch party.
We should definitely discuss the show at some point here,
Oh,
just like as a general
Expert.
thing
Hi,
for
that
sure.
would be me.
That's true.
Anyway,
We started watching the show, like, I think I've seen the first episode like 3 times now, actually.
I
started
promise
watching
you
it
just give it a
and then we
chance
watched.
beyond the first episode. Give it a
Listen.
chance beyond the first episode.
So the
We watched
issue
a
is,
few,
I was
but-
so excited when it came out because I was such a fan of these books, and I was like waiting for it because I was a fan like even before the movie. So like I was excited for the movie, and I was just kind of like, oh.
Yeah, the movie.
But then I was like, a show is gonna give it like so much time and so much effort, and then the show was just like, oh. You walk into this
Listen,
institute and it's like really futuristic and high tech, and I was like, what is happening here?
It's
What
not
is
their
this?
fault. It is the TV network's fault. We're only giving them 10 episodes for the first season.
Listen. But still.
I will go down this rabbit hole, so I suggest we move on before
We'll do
on
watch
this rabbit
parties at some point. Anyway.
That's true. That's fair. I guess this is a good point to actually talk about the Shadowhunters now, right?
Alright, let's talk about the book that we all
what we're here for.
Yeah.
Speaking of, we have now read the entirety of Clockwork Angel. If you have not finished Clockwork Angel and you are intending to do so without spoilers, this is not the podcast for you. Take a minute. This is your warning. Stop. Come back after you've read the book. Or if you're just here for vibes and a good time and you've already read it or you don't intend to read it, then listen on because we're going to be talking about everything that happens through the ending. So speaking of, Ginny, why don't you give us a recap?
All right. So this is the ending, of course. So a lot happens, and a lot happens like at once in the last couple chapters. So the summary might be a little bit more scattered this time. I'm gonna do my best, but you guys jump in if you need to. Well, we left off in the last end of a summary where just like Nate is just gone now, right? They're like, Nate's missing.
Oh, no, that's right.
So luckily, within like 2 pages, we find him.
He was not that missing.
He was not that.
I
missing,
love it.
guys. Yeah, and like the big cliffhanger, Nate's missing, and like 2 pages later, they're like, "Oh, he's in the drawing room
found
hiding
him.
behind the curtains." Yeah,
He's having a
hiding behind
moment.
the curtains. He's having a moment. Exactly. I mean, so the thing is, he's woken up now from all the drugs and the sleepy happy pills or whatever that they sedated him with, so he can, yeah. You know, the Silent Brothers did some weird stuff. You know, we don't know what to do. But he wakes up, and now he's, like, frightened because he's in a weird place. And then there's all these Shadowhunters who he believes are the bad guys, basically. And so they find him hiding. Yes, they find him hiding in the drawing room, and then Tessa goes, calms him down. They have their little reunion moment, and which is interesting because they're talking during this reunion moment about there's this discussion on like, oh, what are we gonna do after this is all over? And then Tessa has this realization that she can't go back to a normal life, like she's not normal. So that's a moment. But then the Shadowhunters come in and they start questioning Nate about what he knows about all this Magister business, as you will. So he tells this whole long spiel story of how he gets to here, basically. So he's like, oh, I was in a lot of debt for gambling, which is a recurring theme with Nate. So he's in a lot of gambling.
Gambling get.
Yes. Exactly. He's in a lot of gambling.
Words are hard, friends.
Words are
Words are
hard.
so hard.
And then he is like, ah, I remember this gold bracelet that my mom had. My mother, who is now deceased, I'm going to pawn it off to pay my debt.
What a
So
dick.
what an asshole, right? So he goes to search for this bracelet, and then he finds these diary pages instead. And then he's like, ooh, let me read these pages. And he learns about, how their mother and
All my
father were in
mother's deepest, darkest
London.
secrets.
Yeah, right. And then dad worked for Mort Main, and then they get invited to go, or they have these suspicions about what his occult activities, whatnot. And then Mort Main invites him to the Pandemonium Club, and then it's just like they keep going a few times, and then all of a sudden they just like disappear. They leave London without a trace, and it's weird, right? Nobody knows what happened. So then Nate's like, hoo, 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 I have this cool plan. I'm so smart. I'm going to write Mort Main and be like, I am their son, and I know about all your occult activities, so give me a job, or else I will expose you to the world. Yeah. That's how I imagine that Nate is talking
That makes
about
sense.
this.
That makes sense. I see that. Yeah.
Yeah.
Also, I also see it.
Yeah. And so Mort Main is like, oh, welcome. Come on in, blah blah. I'm happy to hire you. All this stuff, and Nate's like, oh, well, that went better than expected. Also take me to the Pandemonium Club. I demand it. And Mortmain's like, fine. And then they go. And then Nate once again gets himself into more gambling debt, as it were. It's great at first,
Boy.
and then he gets himself into trouble with De Quincey specifically, and when he has nothing left to offer. He is in so much debt, he is not going to work because he is just in debt, and yeah, bad times.
He's in more debt than any man could ever hope to pay back, I think is the verbiage that's
He's in
put in
so
there.
much debt. Exactly. And then De Quincey is like, what about your sister? And Nate's like, huh? Um, and then, yeah, apparently De Quincey knows about her powers and all that. And then it's like, bring her to me, blah, blah, blah. And Nate's like, okay, because he's an asshole. And so he writes
Because
the
Nate
letter.
sucks.
Because Nate sucks.
That's
And
like
so he
the ending of
writes
the
the
book.
Nate
letter.
sucks.
Because Nate sucks.
That really, like that whole chapter, I'm like, we just learned that Nate sucks, and he just like continues to suck more as the story goes on, as he's recounting this. Yeah. And he writes the letter, sends the tickets, blah, 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 and the rest is kind of history. We know what happens at that point. Tessa comes to London, and, Nate gets held by De Quincey, blah, blah, blah. And then that's where he learns that De Quincey is the Magister. And De Quincey has all these plans because he hates Shadowhunters. Yes, yes. Right. And he is planning to bind the soul demon's energies to the automatons on the night of the full moon, because that's the only time when it can happen. Using the Dark Sisters, like,
Everything's falling into
whatever.
place.
Everything is falling into place, and then Jem runs off to the library and is like, when's the full moon? It is tonight! Of course.
Dun
Yeah.
dun dun.
Dun, dun, dun. So then everyone like, bah! Okay, so then like Charlotte and Henry go get the Enclave, and they're gonna go raid De Quincey's house, and then everybody else has to stay here because they're a little too young. But then, so then like Tessa and Nate and Jesse, or specifically Nate and Jesse, are like, let's just play some cards.
Let's play cards.
And then
This is a great time
let's
to
play cards. We have nothing else to do here, so let's play cards. And then there's a knock on the door, and Mort Main shows up. Because,
oh, goodness.
yeah, okay. So Jem and Will answer the door as a resident Shadowhunters here. And they're like, yes, we know all this information you've told us. I don't understand why you're here. This is not important. And Mort Main's like, but did you know that the Dark Sisters are both alive? Just like that. And,
Yes.
and then they're gonna redo that spell, and it's gonna be a problem. And then Will and Jem are like, well, do you know where they are? And he's like, yes, I do. They're at Highgate. And then Will and Jem are like, well, I guess we're off to Highgate. And then like as soon as they leave, the automatons like come and invade the institute. Using its Jem's blood on the hand of the one that had previously attacked Jem, so that they can get in, because the institute.
Only the blood of a Shadowhunter can open the gates.
Yeah, Right, because only the blood shadow end over the gates, and then Tessa's like, "Oh no, that's the one that has like Jeb's blood on his hand," and like that's not creepy at all. Great. So
This is
then
so morbid.
it's really morbid.
Do you want
Um,
to talk about morbid? Because
this whole, I mean, we've talked about this whole book. Like, there's a lot of like horror movie level stuff happening
For
here.
real. Oh,
It's
especially here in the last few
crazy.
chapters. But we'll
These
get to
last
that.
few chapters are crazy too. Yeah, this is kind of a long
This is a long
spiel,
segment,
a
but it's
lot
fine.
but
A
happens.
lot's
there's a
happening.
lot that happens here. So we do a lot of jumping back and forth. So I'm gonna try to kind of condense it to like sections of people doing certain things. So like at the Institute, we have one thing going on, and then we have the other Shadow Hunters in the Enclave that went over to Quincy's, and then we've got
Will
which we
and Jem.
actually don't hear anything about that
No.
for we don't really hear anything about that for a while. And then we have Will and Jem on their side mission to go deal with the Dark Sisters. Um, and then but first of all, yeah, we have the automatons that have now entered the Institute, and then Agatha gets stabbed like immediately, and then Sophie understandably is panicking, freaking out here.
Yeah.
Yeah, so that's happening, right? And then luckily we still have Thomas around, and then Jesse, who is a shadow hunter who can fight. We know this. So
Good for
then
Jessie.
yeah, exactly.
That's my girl.
Yeah. So there's that. Let's see what else happens. Jem and Will. Or yeah,
You're missing some very
what's up?
important. I don't know if you want to mention it in the summary. Some very important information
Mhm.
about Mortmain.
Go for it.
So we've been told that De Quincey is the Magister,
Yeah,
but we
right.
learn that's not actually true.
Yes. Yeah, that is. Yeah, he comes back. Is the other thing. Like the automatons are doing this whole thing, and then they're fighting the automatons, and then Thomas is like, "Take everybody to the sanctuary."
I
So
just couldn't remember in
they
what
start
order that had
going.
happened.
And yeah, it's all
happening
just like
all at
it's
once.
happening all at once, and it doesn't really. Yeah, the order. Yeah, we start to see this like Magister thing falling apart the longer that we start reading all this. So then, yeah, he's like, take them to the sanctuary. Like Thomas is fighting them off, and then Mortmain shows up again. And is like, I don't think so. Um, and then they're like, he's the Magister. Yeah, and yeah. So there's this whole thing, and then
Mortmain
Nate,
is the
like,
Magister.
Mortmain is the Magister, and Nate is a dirty, rotten traitor.
Ah!
Because why not? Because
Ah!
Nate continues to be an asshole throughout this whole thing. Yeah, and just gets worse and worse. So it was part of their plan all along. This whole thing was their plan all along to have De Quincey take the fall for all this stuff, and then to get Will and Jem out of the Institute as well, so that it would not be protected. So yeah, Will and Jem are having this whole ordeal with the only one Dark Sister because one of them has actually not been brought back yet.
But she was
So
going to try that evening.
she was going to try it that evening, so there's like this whole summoning circle thing happening. But when they start fighting, she throws the sister's head at Will, and it's
It's real gross.
disgusting.
Hilarious.
Will's like, I'm gonna
hilarious,
vomit.
but
And
it's
Jem's like, you ain't
so
got time for that,
gross.
bro.
Right? Jem's like, keep moving. Nothing to see here. He just like kicks the head or whatever. Yeah. So they're doing this whole thing, and then of course that chapter ends where the Dark Sister, the one who's left, I think it's Mrs. Dark, is just like, we're gonna do what now, huh? And then because they're like, you're gonna buy the demon energies. We know about your plan. And she's like, what? Uh,
Exactly
And
like
then
that.
they start putting together all of
Yeah.
these things, and they're
and
like,
then they're like,
ah,
wait
damn
a
it.
second.
Will and Jem start putting the
We got
pieces together.
bamboozled.
We've been done a bamboozle.
We've done a bamboozle. Yeah. And then
Inconceivable.
Dark Sister is like, ha 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 ha. You thought, ha ha ha. The Quincy is not the Magister. Ha 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 ha.
I
Yeah.
love this impression of the Dark Sister. Just want to say.
It's wonderful.
All my impressions of everybody today. We've got Mortmain.
The
We've got
vibes.
Nate, we've
The
got
summary
Dark
passes the
Sisters.
vibes.
Nate, Dark Sister.
It does.
Ginny is on a roll.
Chaotic.
What was that about
Listen.
improv skills? Because you definitely have them.
Ginny's going.
Okay.
Also,
much
there's
is
a cat.
happening. Yes, the cat.
cat.
The cat.
Jem is just like,
Jem was just like, there's this cat. We need to rescue it.
and Will is like, we gotta go. And Jem is like, but there's a cat.
But the cat.
They
Yeah.
do rescue the cat.
So they take
They
the cat.
do rescue the cat. Yeah, they end. Let's type Will and Jem's thing because it's just a lot of just like back and forth banter, chatting, verbally fighting because they can't really land hits on Mrs. Dark super well because she's in the pentagram. So they have to break it, and then Jem's finally like, "Cut it down, Will!" And then Will's like, "Oh!" and throws his sword up at the chandelier and breaks the seal and the pentagram, and then
More
everything
swinging
goes
from a
up in
chandelier.
flames. Yeah, exactly. So yeah, boom,
Jem
everything
can't cut
goes
it down
to
because he's
boom.
holding the cat.
Ah, that's why. Yep, you're right. He's holding the cat. I have more important things to be doing here, buddy. I need you to come through and
I
help
mean, we
us
love
out.
our cat friends.
We do love church.
We do. We do. So that's kind of how that whole thing wraps up with them, and they're like, we need to get back to the institute, and then Will is
Being
like,
the person he is.
Oh,
being
actually,
Will
this time.
is like, one horse is faster than the carriage. Shoot, cuts loose. One of the horses like, bye bye, Jem, and Jem is like, what the fuck, bro?
And
And
also,
he's like,
he
well,
made a
we gotta
mess of the harnesses, and Jem
yeah.
has to sit there and figure out
He did.
how to tie Xanthos
Oh.
back to the cart.
Yeah, he's like, Xanthos can carry the cart if it's just one person. And besides, you got the cat. And then Jem is like, what?
And Will's like, bye,
Bye,
Jem!
I guess. Yeah, and Will's like, bye,
And Will
Jem.
rides like a madman
Well,
back to the institute.
yeah, exactly. And that's how
To
the
that tune,
kind of
exactly.
wraps up a minute. Yeah, that's exactly what is happening. So that thing kind of wraps up over there. And then we're back at the institute, and and Tessa and Sophie are trying to get to the sanctuary. Nate ends up interrupting them. Of course, he does. Tessa's angel also comes to life in this, in a dire moment of need. So her pendant kind of like
flies
and
away
Exactly
after.
like
yeah, slices through an automaton, I believe it is. Just like
yes, one that had been like crushing Tessa.
Yeah.
Enough so that it lets go of Tessa.
Right.
Yes. Yeah. So they have time to try and keep going, get to the sanctuary. There's a lot happening at this time. Like the automatons are still fighting, and Thomas is still fighting, and Agatha is decidedly dead. Sophie, Jesse, and so I think Jesse also gets knocked out at some point is the problem because it's just Tessa and Sophie heading to the sanctuary, but then Sophie's like, the key!
I forgot the
I
key!
don't have it! I never got it! I have to go get it! And of course. And then Nate's like, hello, Tessa. Tessie, if you will. And they have this whole
And Nate's like, I'm a bad person. And Tessa's like, but are you really? And Nate's like, yes, I am. And Tessa's like, no.
Yes, I am. I'm a terrible
We'll get to that.
human. Yeah. We'll have to dive into more of Nate shenanigans in depth.
Hi, Milo.
Sir, please.
Yes.
Hi, Milo. Hi, Milo.
Sir, please.
That's Milo.
Yeah. The doggos. Yeah, and I did they make
and
it
then
to
Jesse shows
the sanctuary?
No, Jesse shows up.
So
when
they
Tess and Nate are talking.
When Sophie's gone to get the key, Jesse shows up and basically creates an opportunity for them to unlock the sanctuary and get in.
Yes, so I was gonna say they do get in, but then
Do you want help?
Oh, now I remember how it's. Now I remember. Okay, yeah, because
You got it? Do you need help?
I didn't write this part down. Yeah, so then because they're in there, because I was like, what is that? Because Mortmain isn't in there, but how? It's because Mortmain imitates Will's voice as like, hello, it's me, open up. And Jesse's like, okay, and opens it up, and then Mortmain is in the sanctuary now too.
And they're all just like, but we thought you were Will.
Yeah, and he's like, but I'm not, fools. And then he's like, take them, and then so Nate and the Avatars are instructed to kill Jesse and Sophie, and Tessa's like, wait, don't do it. And Mortmain's like, well, just don't be a problem, and nobody gets hurt. And she's like, fine, I'll do what you want, or whatever. It's typical ability, whatnot. But they still get taken out of the sanctuary, and Nate gets the Pyxis. Is what happens, and then because that's what he was supposed to do, or he's gonna go get the Pyxis, and then he's got Jesse and Sophie, and the automatons have them too, and then now we're just down to Mortmain and Tessa, kind of standing off here, and then Mortmain's like, "Here, this is what I want you to do: is change," and he gives her this gold pocket watch, and Tessa is just like, "No."
I shan't, and you can't make me.
I will not change. And Mortmain's like, no. Yeah.
He's
And
like,
so-
all right, then everybody dies.
Yeah, then everybody dies.
And then Tessa's like, but wait!
Tessa's like, no. And actually, she does change, we learn.
But she takes a
But-
knife and she turns it against her because she's learned at this point that
She
Mortmain
does.
is more concerned about her safety than anyone else or even his own.
Mortmain
And
wants
so-
her for something.
Exactly. So
Yeah.
she turns the knife against her. It's like, if you hurt them, then I will fall on this knife and do it myself and all this other good
Mortmain's
stuff.
like, you wouldn't dare, and she's like,
You
try me.
wouldn't. She's like, I will. And then there's like blood happening, and he's like,
Mhm.
oh, she will. Yeah.
And then she does.
and then she
And then
does.
And
Will
cut to
Then
Will.
shows up.
Will rushes in and is like,
Finds her.
no.
Well,
Yeah.
Will finds
Like,
a lot of
she's
other
dead.
stuff. He finds
Oh,
Agatha
yeah, he's
dead.
walking into the institute, and it's
He finds Thomas, who he thinks is dead.
who is not,
Yes,
but very
is
close
not.
to
Yet,
it.
at least.
And they share some parting words. And then Thomas passes on. It's all very sad.
Yeah. That's a
And
moment.
then he goes and finds Tessa.
And then he finds Tessa, and then he's like, yeah.
Tessa's dead too!
Tessa is
No,
dead
she's
too.
not.
I have lost everything. Dun dun dun.
She's fine.
Well,
Spoiler
yeah,
alert,
she's fine, actually. Spoiler, she's fine.
Fine in the
dead.
physical sense,
She's
at
fine.
least.
yeah.
She's
And
like,
then
I
so-
changed. I remembered that there was this
Yeah.
person
Morgan
I changed
disappeared, by
into.
the way.
Yeah.
He just
poofed.
poofed.
He does
He
that.
just poofed. He does that.
He's a
Nate
human who
also
can use
poofed.
magic. It's all.
Yeah. So Nate
So
and Morgan
they-
just poofed.
Yeah, they talk
They
about
got
what
special
happened,
years.
and
Yeah.
then basically the next chapter is like cuts to a few weeks later.
Yeah.
Yes.
Well, finally the Enclave like returns too,
Mhm.
and it's like, oh no, all this stuff happened. We've all been done a bamboozle. Yeah, De Quincy is dead, but everyone was like, ha ha, you thought he was the Magister, ha ha.
You've been duped.
Yeah.
Mhm.
And then like you said, we jump forward in time. Shadowhunter funeral. We learn about a little bit.
They dress in
For,
white.
They do dress in white. It is odd for people, the normies, the mundanes, to be like, huh. So yeah, they dress in white, and they have a funeral for the Shadowhunters that were lost in the De Quincy Manor raid, and also Sophie and not
Or
Sophie,
Agatha.
Thomas and Agatha. Yeah. Yeah, so they have this funeral, and then they're just kind of chatting about what's going to happen at this point, what's happening. Will and Tessa have this whole thing that we will get into in depth. I know,
Charlotte invites Tessa to
Alice's.
stay.
but yes, Charlotte is like, yeah, Tessa's like, I'm sure they're going to ask me to leave because I've caused all these problems.
And Tessa's
then
like,
Charlotte's
Charlotte's like, no, we want you to stay.
Yeah. And then Tessa runs off to find Will and be like, guess what?
Guess
I'm
what?
going
I'm
to
staying."
stay. And then Will's like,
We'll get to what Will says. I think,
Yeah.
yeah.
we can pass on that for now. And Will does the Will.
Will
thing.
does the Will thing.
Will does
does
what
the
Will
Will.
does best.
Ends up pushing Tessa away. Tessa ends up running into Jem, of course.
And Jem's
after
there to
that-
make it all better.
And Jem's there to clean up
Will's
Will's
messes.
mess, of course.
We learn more
as
about the
well.
cat.
We do.
The
Cat,
church!
who is now
Church
named
cat.
Church. Church cat.
I
Who might-
have-
may
yeah.
or may not be immortal.
I have opinions on that I will get to.
Yeah. I mean, that's
And then-
kind of about the
There's the epilogue.
There's
the
the
closing.
epilogue.
Oh yes, the epilogue. Basically, it's just like 4 pages in which we learn that Magnus Bane is getting roped into Shadowhunter bullshit for the first
For the first time.
of many. Of many.
We stay at Magus Bane.
We do.
Magnus Bane,
Will shows up
Okay.
soaking wet to his house, like, help me!
help me.
End scene.
And Magnus is like, well,
Damn it,
So-
he's
yeah.
pretty.
I think we
Yeah.
should start a discussion off today with paying respects to Agatha and Thomas.
Oof.
R.I.P.
Yeah.
Will and
Respects
Agatha.
to both of them.
That
I said it, I literally wrote this in my notes. I was like, F in the chat, and then I was like, well,
Aw,
maybe we should say hail and farewell instead.
Hail him forever.
hail and farewell. Yeah.
Hail and farewell, Agatha and Thomas. You served the London Institute well.
He did.
They did.
Thomas gets a
Um,
really moving tribute, though.
He
in other
does.
books,
He does.
in a way that I didn't realize until I was reading this book rereading this book, and then I was like, oh!
Oh, I didn't realize you meant
Right.
later books. I thought you
Right.
just meant like his scene with Will.
That
That
I mean,
is
it's
a really
great
moving
scene
scene.
too, actually.
I was,
Yeah,
Um,
I agree.
but like the big thing, another big thing we should talk about is the reveal of who the Magister is.
Ugh. I mean, we
I mean,
done
we
knew this
been
whole
knew.
time because
We knew because we read
there's a
these
reread.
before.
And I think
It's so
and
rereading it. It's really well laid out.
Mm-hmm.
The foreshadowing is
Yeah.
there.
It's there. It's definitely there. And
Even if you
I'm
don't
not sure
see
if
the
it's
force.
something. Yeah, like I'm not sure if I mean, I think I might have actually picked it up on it the first time just because it had like we've seen the instance several times where everyone's like, the Magister to Quincy, nothing.
Right.
Like
You
straight
may
up.
not
exactly.
see foreshadowing to exactly who the Magister really is, but you definitely see that
yeah.
it's very heavily implied to not be De Quincy because it's never confirmed.
Right.
Right.
And the only person who does confirm it is Nate.
Is Nate, who is a dirty
I think
rotten
Mortmain
liar.
also confirmed
Dirty
it.
rotten liar.
I think the two of them confirmed it, Mortmain and Nate.
I think Mortmain did too as well. Yeah.
Probably, but that would make sense.
Right.
Because everything is a lie. The whole story of everything. Nate is just the worst, actually.
Yeah.
And so with Mortmain being the Magister, we realize that he has this sort of bigger narrative at play. He says that, like, he made Tessa in so many terms.
He does.
Which
talks
we
about how
don't
it's not
know
just
exactly
him.
what that means.
Right. He talks about how it's been generations in the making and how all this work went in and he was hoping for a girl and all these, like, all the stuff that he did to sort of make Tessa happen. So he talks about Tessa's mother being something other than human. And he says that Tessa's father was indeed a demon, confirming her warlock status, but says that her mother had no idea she was being unfaithful to her husband and all this. So
really quickly, Ali, did you say her mother was not human? Because I thought it was stated that she was human.
Not fully human. It's complicated.
Implied that she's special. Like
she's special.
Yeah.
I swear that I have it in my notes, but maybe I wrote it down wrong. Okay.
The thing is, he also avoids the questions a lot.
Yes,
when Tessa's like, "What about my mother? What about my father?" He's like, "You're asking the wrong questions." Is what he kind of does.
Okay.
Right. So there's a lot of questions here. And obviously, having read the series, I know what ultimately it is, but yeah.
I know it's something, I just don't know what the, remember.
And I do think, and I also picked up, like, in the reading that she's not, at least if she's a human, she's not like a normal human. She's got some sort of something. She's special juice something, whether she's human or not, yeah.
So we have even more questions about Tessa than we had previously.
We have a lot of questions about Mortmain, because we know that the Magister wants to marry Tessa, but we don't know...
Yes, we do know that. Why?
Right, we don't know why. A. B, we also don't know what this pocket watch is. We don't know. It has the initials, I think it's JTS on the back. Yeah, we don't know anything about who that pocket watch belonged to.
Nope.
Right.
So it's another question.
Yeah. But he knew about her ability to change. And so we can assume that he's looking for some way to use that. We just aren't sure how, or how any of that sort of comes together in the span of the greater narrative. So we have more questions than ever about the Magister and their nefarious purposes and Tessa's origins.
Yeah, as a true book that leads into another book, right?
Yes, indeed.
There's a lot of unanswered questions in here.
And as much as Nate's betrayal and all of that, and, hurts Tessa, and I feel for Tessa, she's also still kind of a bitch in these chapters.
Yeah.
Like what do you mean? To him or in general?
No, in general. Like, I have it written sort of down here.
I definitely was reading this. There were a few moments where I was like, Tessa, really?
Yeah, like when everybody goes off to look for De Quincy and all that, and Jesse is like, let's just play a game of cards. Like, we can't do anything to help. We may as well. Sitting here isn't going to, sitting here isn't going to do anything. Tessa's like, how can you just sit here? Like, you should be doing something, blah, blah, blah. And also, this goes into more that we can talk about Tessa and her relationship with Nate, but she just babies Nate so much.
So,
because
I thought that was interesting because we get this really, like, jarring back and forth through Tessa's eyes, where, like, we see Nate is like, oh, this precious thing needs to be babied, and then, like, in these later chapters, she's very aggressive and very, like, aggressive towards Nate, and is very frustrated, and is like, well, he doesn't do anything himself, little does Jesse know that he sucks, and just, like, like, we get this really intense and dramatic shift in her viewpoint of Nate's like function, which is really interesting.
We can go back to that, but what I was saying was like, she's like, oh, he's got a gambling problem, and it's like, yeah, but playing cards is not the same thing as gambling. And then also later, where do I say it? I have Will and Tessa are talking. Oh, here. Will and Tessa are basically talking about, helping. And she accuses Will of not doing anything to help. And she's just acting like a spoiled brat.
Tessa... So, my resolution was to come into this book giving Tessa some grace. Because that is... I have literally...
Allie was a Tessa hater.
I was. I literally have a story that I was writing with a
I
friend.
think I'm becoming one.
Fuck you, Tessa,
I wasn't before, and I think I am becoming one.
So yeah, my mission has been to go in this with grace. I think that Tessa reacts in a lot of ways in these moments like a child. And it's important to keep that context. Like, rereading this as an adult, I have a lot more context that Tessa is young. She's in this new environment. She's... this is a new culture and a new thing. She's not sure how Shadowhunter society works. So she's very, caught off guard. She's the, she's a foreigner in every sense of the word. Not only is she not a Londoner, so the city itself is new, but she's also not a Shadowhunter. So, the culture surrounding her is entirely new. She's this alien in a foreign place. And... so I'm holding some grace for this behavior, because she's seen that Jesse, Will, and Jem are all very, very capable people. And she's like, well, why are you sitting on your ass doing nothing? It's like, I know that you're capable of these things. Why are you not? Blah, 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 blah. And then sort of outside of Tessa, we see more about how the Shadowhunter Society works. And there's a moment where I think it's Charlotte who says that Benedict said that it's their duty to leave the younger generation at home. So that way the Shadowhunters continue to exist. Is kind of the vibe. So I
think
but absolutely she's being annoying.
Right. I think I'm having the opposite that you are, Allie, is that I don't think reading this when I was younger I saw how annoying Tessa was, and now I see it.
This is fun. This is why rereads are fun, because we're picking different things up and looking at different moments like I don't know if I feel any differently about Tessa than I did when the thing is, my first read of this was as an adult too. Right. So I'm not sure if my opinion on Tessa is much different. I hold a lot of grace for her, just knowing that, she is a teenager, is young. Yes, she has annoying moments. But at the same time, she has her heroine moments too, when she's like, no. And decides that she can...
That was a badass Tessa moment, yeah.
It was a badass Tessa moment.
It was. And I literally was like, I said something about it. I was like, all right, Tessa, go off. I respect it.
Right. And then it's interesting because in that moment too, she has this thing where it's like she's having this phenomenon of hearing the sound of her own voice saying it and not realizing that she said no.
Right.
Because, and I was like...
And it's also very, what's the word? It's very... disruptive is not the word, but that's the one that's coming to mind right now. Contrary to the times where she's a woman saying no. And she's, behaving in a way that is very feminist. And
Mortmain said something, right before that, there's, violence is not, something like violence isn't suited to women, or something like that, where it's a very aligned.
And Tessa herself has been struggling with the idea of Charlotte as a warrior.
Exactly. So that was a good moment of, her coming around to that, in a way,
and
putting her foot down.
More in that moment. It's kind of interesting how it was a conversation she had with Will that gave her the idea to do what she did.
It was, yep.
And what did she do? She used her power. She did change. She remembered that when she was training with the Dark Sisters, there was one deceased person she had changed into, who, when she had changed into them, her chest began to spew forth with blood. And she remembered
because that person was shot in the chest or something like that.
Yes, they were shot in the chest, and that's how they passed away. So in the sort of this last moment, she turns into this person, the blood pours down, and then
turns away from Mortmain so that he can't see her face.
Right, and then quickly changes back in that. but the shock did cause her to actually pass out, which helped the
Yes.
illusion. But yeah,
Yeah. Which
And
was
then
very,
there's a little
yeah,
bit.
it was a very smart thing there at that moment to, yeah.
Mhm.
I was
And
like,
Mortmain falls for it.
he does.
he does, and he poofs away.
He does. He does poof away.
So do we want to go back and talk about how Nate's an ass?
Uh,
We can't.
we can. I don't have much to say other than he sucks so much. And I
I
just wrote
think
that several times in my notes. I'm like,
I
he
think
sucks.
for
And like 2
me,
lines later, he
maybe
sucks
maybe
bitch.
I think I have like
Uh,
I have thoughts on it regarding how it affects other characters.
Sure.
yeah.
Like Tessa we kind of talked about already, but like Jessie, and yes, I will bring up any excuse to talk about my girl Jessie. She has been pining after Nate, thinking he's this guy that's going to take her away from the life of a Shadowhunter. And I have been thinking this from the very beginning since Jessie sort of set her sights on Nate. I was like, girl, sweetie, it's not worth it. Don't do it. It's only going to cause you pain. And so, like, and then she was basically forced to, again, to put, and she was put in her, was put in a situation where she had to be a Shadowhunter again and fight.
Mm-hmm.
And
yeah,
it's because of Nate.
It is, and she had to fight
is.
Nate.
It
She
is his
drops
fault.
a lamp on his head and knocks his bitch ass out.
And we were led to believe at first that
Oh,
it was
yeah.
Sophie, but it was actually Jessamine.
It was Jessie. She. Yep.
She said, "Not today."
Not today.
And it breaks my heart because this is not what she wanted. She just wanted someone to take her away from this life, and she thought Nate was the plan to be able to do it. And now he's betrayed not only Tessa, but he used Jessamine as well.
He did. He's a user.
He did.
He's an asshole. We see sort of this portrait of Nate through Tessa, where it's talked about that how he's always been babied in so many ways, and he's always had like this very privileged life. Nate was never told no to, and he never had to be like exposed these ways. So he's used to being doted on, and he's used to all of these things. He's become this like petulant brat, essentially, who will do what he wants, is very self-centered, and we see a lot of that, and we see that kind of coming to a head in these moments.
And
where
Nate, sorry, didn't mean to cut you off. Nate was also the reason that their Aunt Harriet died.
Yes, he was.
Oh.
He sent a box of chocolates that was poisoned or something because he knew Tessa wouldn't eat them.
Mm-hmm.
Because Tessa doesn't like chocolate.
This plan but that, goes to also show that this plan has been in motion for a long time.
Exactly.
It does. Yeah. Nate the more we learn about him, the more we don't like Nate. He's not good.
The more he just sucks.
He sucks.
And I was like, as if, and we kind of talked about this before we went live, I was like, as if I didn't already hate Nate. He called my girl Jessie a whore.
He did.
As a man, you cannot say that.
As a man, you cannot say that. That does not belong to the cishet white guys.
That does not belong to you, Nate. Yeah.
I thought I wrote a note on this, but they were talking, sort of going quickly back to what you were saying about like Nate being babied. Mm-hmm. Tessa said that her and her aunt like never told Nate what his flaws were, or that his like they basically didn't allow him to believe that his actions had consequences or something.
Right.
Oh yeah, Tessa and Aunt Harriet hid Nate's weakness from him, the consequences of his flaws and failings. What good is that going to do? And that's probably what got Nate into this whole mess in the first place.
Mm-hmm. I mean, it kind of is, and because there is this moment where, like, for all of Nate's everything, there's like a shred of self-awareness that he knows that he is not special, and that is pushing him to want to be special. He knows that he has these problems. He has problems,
right? And part of it is his gambling addiction, but part of it is also he believes he can do no wrong.
Right.
Yeah. So like, because there's this moment, where they're talking about where Nate's giving his whole BS story, but he says something where he talks about like how your sister has all the special like blood, blah blah, and Nate says it like bitterly, like it should have been me, or like he's talking about like it should have been me. So there's this, and that's why that's what he ultimately what makes him join Mortmain as like because he thinks that he is going to be this special person elevated to a cool status once Mortmain takes over England.
Yeah.
You know.
In that moment, Nate kind of sees Tessa taking his specialness away from him, where he's learning that Tessa actually has like all these powers, and Nate is learning that he's just some guy. And sort of in that moment, it's the first time where he's not the prized possession in the room. You know? And I think that there's a lot of bitterness about that.
Yeah.
And he's then having to cope with, well, why can't I be just as special? Why is my presence not as meaningful? And yeah, he wants that specialness for himself, which is ultimately why, on top of the gambling, he turns to Mortmain and becomes sort of this right hand and is willing to even sell Tessa out to be special.
Yeah.
Yeah. A lot of these chapters is like this Mortmain and Nate stuff. So
yeah. And I that's the thing about like Nate too, is like we learn that he sucks a lot of times, but it's like every time it gets worse, because like at first we're like, oh, he sold Tessa out because he was being held hostage and he didn't have a choice. And then it's like, oh, it's because
this was his choice.
And it was his fault. And then, oh, it's because it was like literally his choice. He decided that he was going to sell his sister out because he wants to be special. So it's like,
but then he'll still go and call her.
Worse.
He'll still go and call her Tessie, which is like supposed to be an endearing nickname. And he kind of is like, "What? No, I'm not doing that." And Tessa's like, "Yeah, you are." And it's like he doesn't even know he's doing it.
Right.
Nate's self-awareness only extends so far. There's not a lot of it happening.
And and Tessa is still, you know, and I think a lot of us in this situation too would want to still believe that there's a shred of hope to grab onto, that your family, you know, you are family, and that means something. It doesn't just mean nothing. That maybe all these feelings are just, you know, this hatred is just feelings, and it's not what you really, really truly believe or think. And in that moment where she's like, well, you're still calling me Tessie, and he's like, huh? I'm not doing that. Like, that's a moment that shows a maybe. No. You know, there's a maybe still.
Nate takes the Pyxis with him when he leaves, but that's supposed to be it's supposed to only be able to be opened by runes, which only Shadowhunter can draw.
Right.
So what's going on there?
But Mortmain has shown that he is a lot more than meets the eye in general.
Mortmain out here playing 3D chess, man.
I literally said, I wrote that in my note, and I was literally like, I made an additional bullet point. I was like, yeah, we'll see about that.
Yeah. When I was going back to do the summary, I realized that Tessa actually is the one who told Nate where the Pyxis is, and I was like, without meaning to, and I was like, oh man, yeah,
because he starts freaking out about the box. It's like, oh, it holds like whatever.
Because I know Nate mentions that something about it holding human souls, and Tessa's like, no, it doesn't. Like, it just holds demon energy.
I'll show it to you. It's fine.
I'll show you to it. It's in the weapons room. It's
I think we should move on from this whole thing now, because I feel like we've kind of said everything there is to say about it. We could go on to the Dark Sisters situation.
Sure. What do you have to say about Dark Sisters, other than being like having a severed head thrown at you is terrifying?
Well, one of them isn't actually a warlock.
One of them's a demon, so there's that.
Yeah, that's true.
And she's like, I've been here just minding my own business, trying to figure out a way to bring my sister back, and you came in here and you broke into my home.
Right.
Also, she was experimenting on a cat, so I hate her.
Well, yeah.
As if I didn't already. There's not much really to say about the whole situation. It's more just like, basically you find out that, you know, it was part of the diversion to get them out of the Institute, saying that this whole thing was happening with the Dark Sisters, but it wasn't. But now she's also dead. They're both dead now for good.
Exactly.
Or at least they should be.
In theory, but yeah.
I don't know if there's anything else to mention regarding like that whole night when the automatons attack. I feel like everything, the major stuff we kind of went over.
I kind of want to circle back to things that we're finding interesting on rereads as an adult. I know that we talked about that a little while ago, but I'm still really fascinated by the Charlotte and Henry dynamic. That is still something that I am, like, that's my pet project, is I'm, like, looking into that. On top of my fires caused by and/or Henry on fire counter that I am...
Which we haven't...
Under the counter.
We did?
So, it's a causal fire here. So he does a thing and I forget what exactly the moment was, but he does something, and then the automaton's like hand lights on fire or whatever, or like
Oh, I don't
like
remember that.
yeah. Yeah, I wrote it down. I'll have to find the exact
Yeah. Something
the
I
exact
noticed,
note
which
here.
isn't regarding the characters, it's that Cassandra Clare really loves to use the trope of people's conversations getting interrupted.
Well, I mean, I feel like that happens a lot. I feel like, you know.
Or maybe it's just that we're pointing it out a lot with like Jem and Tessa's moments always getting interrupted. We're pointing it out a lot.
But I'm not done with
So
Charlotte and Henry.
Oh,
I'm
I'm so
not ready
sorry.
to move on from this.
I'm so sorry. Keep going. Keep
So,
going. Talk about our mom and dad.
Yes, mom and dad. So, interestingly, there's this interesting moment where Charlotte is ultimately inviting Tessa to stay, but they have this long moment where they talk about like guilt and like the assigning of blame, and it's Charlotte says that it's Henry who told Bortmain like what a Pixis is and what it does.
Yes.
And so they're kind of going through this whole like assigning blame thing, and then like we see like Charlotte's heart is breaking for Henry in this way, and then Henry's also really upset about it, and obviously, and then Charlotte's keeping this secret for Henry, and she mentions how the Clave already sees Henry, and she talks about how his perceived incompetence and all this other fun stuff, where she's just like, and I'm keeping that secret from him or from the Clave for his behalf because I can't imagine what it would be like, and just oof. But yeah, so I just think that Charlotte continuing to go back to bat for Henry is a really interesting thing, and something that I want to keep an eye on, especially since there's perceived friction. So that's my pet project on the reread. But I've always been a Charlotte stan. I think that she's really neat. And
Agreed. She's great.
Oh, yeah. She's fantastic.
like she's young. She's younger than us at this point. She's like what, 20, young 20s?
26, I think you learned. Like,
Which is how old I am.
or
Almost.
Somewhere between like 24 and 26, 22 and 26 is my.
That seems like
somewhere in there.
But yeah, she's raising these teenagers and like, you know, kicking ass and taking names and doing her best. Meanwhile, like her marriage is complicated, and just like I feel for Charlotte. I want her to succeed.
Oh yeah.
Anything you've noticed, Jenny, on a reread that you want to talk about?
Excuse
Bless
me.
you.
But I was just looking for that thing that I added to the Henry Fire counter. I have a note on it. I was looking for it. Like, where is it?
Where is it?
Ah, okay. Page 441. I wrote it down. That an automaton burst into flame as an on an account of Henry thing. So while he did not like.
He did cause the fire. He is not physically on fire, but
Henry did start the fire.
Yes.
Henry
Okay. Yeah. A
started
yell
the
came from
fire.
behind Jem, and Henry charged past him wielding a massive broadsword. He swung it hard, slashing through the automaton's raised arm and sending its hand flying. It skidded across the cobblestones, sparking and hissing before bursting into flames.
Ah,
Okay.
there it is.
So Henry
Yes.
caused something to set on fire. Okay.
He did cause something to set on fire.
All right, we are running on time, so we need to take some time to talk about Will and Tessa.
The triangle.
Yeah.
Thing.
The whole last chapter. That's why I was like, let's try to.
We're gonna have so many words about this, so.
There's a lot. Yeah, there's a lot happening.
Will does what Will does best, which is push Tessa away.
Yep.
Yeah.
They kiss again.
They do
but then
kiss.
Again.
Tessa comes up to the roof and she's like, Will, she's kind of dancing around the fact that she has feelings and is like expecting him to do the romance lead. Yep.
She gets to stay.
Yeah.
She's comparing their relationship to a Jane Austen novel.
Yes. She lays it out for him, and then he comes in and she's expecting him to do the romance lead, and he's like, well, yeah, we'll have to use your room. And she's like, what?
What?
And then
he's like,
Will's like, well, Jem comes into mine all the time, and like it would be weird if my door was locked, so we need to make sure that we're. And then she's like, what?
At first, you could kind of think it's him being like. At first, you could kind of think it's him wanting to just keep it private, but that's not what's happening.
No. He's like, yeah, an arrangement, so that way we can do, you know, fucking
the things. And he's like, I could never marry you. And she's like, excuse me?
Excuse me? Yeah.
And he says, and then he twists the knife by saying, if you're worried about the unintended consequences of our dalliances, warlocks can't conceive,
Which Tessa didn't know.
which Tessa
Right.
did not know. And Tessa, being a woman of her time, obviously, like, saw herself having children
Yeah.
one day, and, like, all of a sudden, like, this potential future is, like, ripped out from underneath her.
Just ripped away. Yeah.
And then,
yeah,
so basically Tessa storms off, all mad,
as she does.
runs
As
into
she
Jem,
does.
as she does.
As she does, yeah. Well, she's
And they have a
alive, right,
moment.
looking to see if this is true. She's reading the codex and
Mhm.
does find that Will told the truth about warlocks cannot have kids.
Something I find interesting about this moment between Jem and Tessa is that it's not interrupted.
Yeah.
It's not. They actually get to have a moment. How nice.
That's true.
Well, Will's already made an ass of himself. He's up there stewing
Right.
on the...
Yes.
But
Actually, he's
we-
hauling
yeah.
ass to Magnus Bane's house. That's
a
what Will's doing.
common theme is that their moments have constantly been interrupted.
Yes.
So
But
I
even
also
then,
wrote-
she's... Okay, go ahead.
no, go. This is something that's not related to their relationship. You go ahead.
Okay, so the love triangle being set up, obviously, is Tessa, Will, and Jem is the love triangle that's being set up. But all throughout this book... So... It might change throughout Clockwork Princess, because love is one of those emotions that can grow and develop, and you can fall in love with somebody and not just be like there's more beyond that just initial spark. But the chemistry and, like, the fated togetherness of the Will and Tessa interactions is just so intense all of the time. It is a burning flame that burns bright. And, like, Jem is embers that's kind of constant, always there. And I feel that, but just, like, the passion that Will brings to every interaction. And the fact that Tessa always thinks of Will first. There's a moment where
Yeah.
she's reflecting on the fact that she gets to stay. Her first thought is of Will. He gets a full and complete sentence.
She's
himself.
basically the first person that she goes to after finding this information out.
Exactly. Jem
Right.
is mentioned
As soon as
second, but he's
Charlotte's
mentioned
like,
in the
"You
same
stay?"
sentence
She's
in the
like-
same breath with everybody else. So it's interesting.
Yeah.
And then we
Something-
have Jem, who is there after, and then Tessa's seeing Jem this moment where she's very vulnerable, where Will has just told her that he's not interested in her in that way, and that, has cut down any potential future she had imagined of children, of them marrying, and he's just like, nah, and throws all that out. And then here's Jem, and
Who
in this
says
moment,
all the
the
right
man
things.
won't care.
Yeah.
Which he says in a way that, after, like, a pause, and, like, almost second-guessing himself in a way that's not Jem-like.
He sort of chokes up on the words.
Exactly. And then we see that this is the first time that Jem's like, well, I have feelings for you as well. And is kind of putting it out there.
Without directly saying it, kind of, yeah.
Exactly.
He also shows her a jade pendant that Will bought him when he first moved to the London Institute. Which, is a thing. That's really all I can say.
I don't
My
remember
final
the thing,
thought.
but I'm sure it's a thing.
My final
But, like-
thought. Oh, go ahead, Jenny, if you had something to say.
I was just gonna say that, like, it's interesting too. So I wrote down, because it's like, I feel like almost every conversation, or most conversations that one of them has with Tessa, is about the other,
Mm-hmm.
the third
That-
party
that's
not
true.
there, like, which is really interesting. It's just like so every time, like, when Tessa and Will are chatting about half the time they're talking about Jem, and then the same thing, when Jem and Tessa are talking, it's about Will all the time, and it's just like, it's interesting, and I guess part of it goes to show, like, how intertwined Will and Jem are too, in a way. But I also think from, like, the love triangle perspective, it's kind of interesting that we're together, but we're going to talk about the other person.
So, what makes this love triangle interesting is that not only does Tessa hold love for Will and Jem, supposedly also Jem, but Will and Jem also hold this bone and soul deep love for one another, which
Yeah.
makes it more complicated and more interesting.
They're parabatai.
They're parabatai.
They
They're
are.
bonded together, but even that, they're extremely close, even among parabatai relationships.
Yeah.
And, like, Jem is the only person that Will allows himself to be vulnerable around. And, like, Jem shows that same vulnerability around Will, and Will exclusively. And it's, it's intense. And
Yeah.
in a way, they're the only people who who, as close as possible for them, fully understand the other.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
Um.
Jem is kind of like, and the Jem interaction is very different because Tessa ran to Will wanting basically the reaction that Jem gives
Mhm.
Right.
because he's the one who's like, oh, you're staying, I'm so happy about that, blah blah blah. And then when Tessa is like, but actually I don't feel great right now because
Mm-hmm.
of this whole thing with Will, and now I know less about myself and I have so many questions. And Jem's like, well, this could be your family. And he
Mm-hmm.
talks about how the Shadowhunters are his family and how that none of them have families and that they're all orphans here, and that's why they bond together and all these things, and they all have their own relationships and dynamics, and maybe she could grow to like it too, like a
Right.
family. um,
Uh.
And then they talk about why Will's an ass.
Hmm.
and interestingly, we did hear a couple notes too about Will's whole situation. There's a
A
couple
little
moments
bit.
where in Will's head where the things where he's talking about, like, in his brain, how he's feeling the same dread that he felt when he was 12 holding
Yeah.
this box, or like, so there's moments where we're starting to get a little bit of that, and he's like, his moments where he's like, I have lost everything, is this is like the second time that he's thought that. He thought it back
He's
then when he was 12, and
and then he
this.
has those thoughts when he's holding Tessa's dead
Yep.
comatose form as well.
Yeah.
My
And
final
then
thought.
when she's not dead,
Exactly.
he thinks
He
of it
Yeah.
still
too, like
continues thinking that he's lost everything.
even when she's like, look, I was so smart, I did this whole thing, and I remember that book that we read, and this and that, and then he's still just like,
It's
yeah.
happening all over again.
It's happening. Yeah, he can't.
Um,
Oh.
to sort of wrap this up on a bit of a lighter note, my final thought was about the cat, about Church.
Church!
Church.
And I'm going to try to say this without spoiling anything because I don't
I mean, we can
necessarily know
say
if
that
it would.
there's a cat in the City of Bones that is named Church that is presumably
Yeah.
the same cat.
I was like, I literally wrote in my notes, I was like, no way. No way is this the cat that's literally, I was like, that's literally impossible. And
But
I
it
was like,
is.
oh, it is. And I was like, how is he still alive by that point? And I was like, oh, Jem literally spells it out and says that
He
the cat's
does.
now basically immortal. I was like, oh,
Mm-hmm.
that makes sense. But I love that. I just loved how I tracked my thought process. No way. And I was like, it is,
Wait a
but
second,
how? I was like,
no.
oh, that's how.
Did you
I
not
just thought
notice
it
that the
funny.
first time?
I don't think I remembered.
Oh, man.
I might have, I read this years ago. I might have this time, but, like, I don't remember.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, reading it again now, I was like, no way, that's not possible. I remembered the cats. I remembered the cats from the books. I just didn't remember that, like, from now. I just remembered it from TMI, City of Bones.
We all
You
we
know what I
all
mean?
want our companions to be just as immortal, too.
That's true.
It's a
That's
very
literally all
sweet
I wanted to
sentiment.
say. It was just like, how is this possible?
And Church
And
being
then
immortal has
Jen
some really
tells us.
sweet implications beyond the that are spoilery, but it has some really sweet implications that are nice. But yeah,
Anyway,
we like cats.
Not the last that we have seen of Church.
It
nope.
is not by a long shot.
Church is quite the cat.
Yeah.
Indeed.
Anyway.
But yeah.
Well, there's a lot to chew on here. There's more
There is.
questions to be answered in the next book, for
In
sure.
2 weeks, we start Clockwork Prince.
Yes.
Clockwork Prince, or maybe we'll see more of Jem? Question mark.
I hope so, because he got
I
the short
hope
end of the
so.
stick in this book, man.
He's on the cover of that book. I could go grab it real quick.
So.
Wait, no, it's literally right here.
I know that he gets a steamy moment in that book. I know that very vividly.
Is Jem.
It is Jem and his violin.
It is Jem. His violin.
Look at our boy.
But yeah, 2 weeks from now we'll be
back in
here,
2 weeks.
same place, same time. We are on Twitch every other Sunday. The next Sunday that we'll be meeting is August 6th at noon Eastern Standard Time. That is twitch.tv/the Herondale Boy SG pod. So that is what we do here. We are also on Spotify and Apple Podcast and YouTube on the following Monday. So we hope to see you there. Thanks for listening.
We have a Discord if you're interested. It is in our chat right now. It's also on our Twitch page and our socials. I believe it's linked on our socials as well if you're ever interested.
Yep, everything's on our link tree. So if you're wondering where to find us between podcasts, that's where you can find us. But thanks for hanging out, and I'll see you next time.
See you in 2
Bye.
weeks.
Bye. See ya.